This is BofC Live, the video and podcast series of Business of Cannabis. Find out all that we do at businessofcannabis.com. Coming up on this BofC Live, we connect with Lucas McCann. He is with CannDelta. They are official regulatory advisor of Business of Cannabis. We wanted to connect with him to look back on regulatory changes in 2021, as well as a look ahead of what he expects on regulatory changes here in Canada and the US. This is Lucas McCann of CannDelta. Lucas McCann, thank you for being here.
Happy New Year, Jay. Great to see you.
Happy New Year. And it's funny you should say New Year. Last year, are you ready? We connected maybe the first BofC Live we did in all of 2021. You came on to share what you thought was going to be the year ahead.
Oh no, what did I say?
Well, I'm glad you asked. So you talked about the rate of retail licensing. I mean, maybe overall, but specifically in Ontario. You talked about cannabis health products, and you talked about Health Canada looking at the regulations around packaging. So those were the things you talked about. Two of them relied on Health Canada doing lots of cannabis work. How did the year go as measured against that first BofC Live last year?
Jay, if you've ever listened to anything I say, then you know that whenever I say that you can rely on Health Canada, that is absolutely a lie. So those 2 points that pertain to expecting something from Health Canada were obviously out to lunch, and they were. We didn't see any relaxation on packaging or equivalency limits or how many cans of beverages you can buy at the retail store. None of that's changed. We're still a little bit wasteful with our packaging, and that's the result of, I think, some inaction from Health Canada's part to listen to what the industry's saying.
And do you think it's Health Canada saying they had a very busy year related to the pandemic, or is it an entirely different branch and they just didn't do it? Like, I'm not trying to, make anybody Health Canada angry. I'm literally asking, like, can we expect changes?
Well, Health Canada actually gave us a call and they said, so how many applications are you guys expecting to come in this year? Because we're twiddling our thumbs, not doing anything. So, but it's a different department that's reviewing the licensing application and reviewing the regulations as well. So hey, totally fair point. I mean, we're seeing some restructuring there, and there's less people, I think, applying for licenses, and that's a true across the board for retail. That was a big flash in the pan last year, and that was one thing I was right about. In terms of the math formula that we had, Ontario specifically, that was just doing the numbers up, and now we've well surpassed our 1,000 store mark that was predicted this time last year.
I just looked at a map from the AGCO, and it's hard to even get close enough in on the map. So like, it's not inundated with stores on top of each other. It's quite striking, especially obviously in Toronto. And then, there's like different states that one rung out is pretty dense, and then two rungs out, it's, same thing with the population, but it is, it was striking to see. I think we'll look back on, the pandemic timeframe of just the ramp up of retail in Ontario went from us having a conversation like, can't they do it faster, to when our store is going to start closing. Like, it seems like it happened very fast.
Do we need a cool-off period for a year in Toronto because there are just so many applications going through? Completely fair. Most people are actually surprised when we say that there's a lot of underserved areas still in Ontario. We've done a correlation where we've taken all the stores plotted against the map of Ontario. We've looked at the locations of all the schools, and still we see that there are some very good areas for opportunities for cannabis retail to open up.
I believe that. I believe it, because there's, and then some, there's still some opening, the 5th and 6th on a couple of blocks, but like, I know talking to you, but also, those people didn't one day wake up this week and say, I want to open a store. Like, they've been planning that for some time, locking down leases, locking down options. So, the timing of these things isn't always, they're not opening the times that people decided to get in. There's different sort of factors in the timelines.
I love anecdotal evidence, so I'll leave with this one. I mean, right before this, and this isn't just a story, like literally before I got on with you, I had a call with someone in Colborne who's a paralegal, and his business has just been hit very, very hard from COVID, and he's turning to cannabis retail. It's bit of an underserved area where he's located. There's nothing too close to him, and he's looking to convert from computer part sales and paralegal into the cannabis space. So it is still an opportunity. You have to be smart where you're going to open up shop. Definitely now it's less risky than a year ago if you were putting something in on Queen West as to who your neighbors were going to be.
Right.
We saw what the result of that was. You can't throw a stone in any direction without hitting 3 stores.
Yeah. Yeah. And it will be interesting. There's lots of conversation in the places with huge density. What happens to those stores? And I wonder, as we sort of zoom out and sort of take a bigger picture, if like cities like Vancouver didn't get it right and sort of draw 300 meters around each store and say, here's your little monopoly, now go F off.
Yeah, and their licensing is like driving with the e-brake on. You just can't get anywhere.
Right. So you take the good with the bad, right? BC, Ontario, Alberta, we'll start to see, I mean, this is a question. We'll start to see some, especially Alberta and Ontario, some leveling off of the rate of openings, I would imagine.
Yeah, absolutely. But one good plus, if I can sneak that in there too, is the more secure storages that open up in retail stores, the more the LPs were alleviated in their secured storages, and the more that product actually just moved. That's really, really healthy for the industry, despite the fact that yes, some of these retailers, they might be consolidating, they might be selling off their assets or their shares. A lot of that product moving has been really good for the industry, and we were in a heavy price compression last year, which is starting to alleviate now. We're starting to feel like the worst might be over, and maybe we can start to enjoy this industry as it moves out of its infancy.
Yeah, and I hope so. And I think we will see some interesting, like steady state industry trends, I guess, whether it's sort of store openings or numbers of SKUs or what's moving, and sort of the data and analytics around that as well. I want to ask you about sort of projecting ahead. You talked about you and your team doing some data analytics about sort of store locations, but on other sort of parts of the sector, like what are you looking for in 2022, maybe different in a part or a continuation of 2021?
I think things are going to become very quickly less interesting in Ontario, aside from the OCS flow through model, which is a work in progress from the OCS. We have the new product call that's happening in April, so that's going to be really great for Ontario licensed producers or folks looking to get listed by the OCS. Barring that, I expect smooth coasting in Ontario and not too much change. Where we do expect to see some great changes are going to be in British Columbia now, who's been waiting very long to put out their farm gate regulations, which we're expecting before the summertime.
Yeah, and one thing that does not go unnoticed, certainly on Business of Cannabis, but I even know from the CannDelta team, is let's call it constant rumbling in the US, whether it's state by state, which of course the rumbling is getting closer to Canada because we saw you and your team in New York. I know we had Denny on from your team talking about New Jersey. The whole Northeast is rumbling. But then we just talked about it last week. Some of the very big Midwestern states, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Minnesota, coming online or real rumblings. That coupled with what's happening in DC, the rumblings, they seem to be adding up to something, even though if you don't know what the final equation might look like.
The big one, maybe the big one. Yeah, great point. I mean, we've been moving to the US and assisting with a lot of the New Jersey licensing as well. We've got New York on our radar. We're excited for those regulations to drop. And yeah, this all could be a big signal that we could be potentially expecting some form of federal movement, maybe some sort of federal decriminalization at the very least. I know we've been saying this every time, but it would be so big and so massive and so impactful on our industry that it's important that we move it to the top of our list. I think every time we have that conversation about the year ahead.
One question, and then we'll leave it at this and then revisit it in 2023 as well. But thinking about like doing work in New Jersey, doing work in New York, it strikes me that the conversations basically repeat themselves jurisdiction to jurisdiction, right? New York just got done, I think, at the end of December, where cities and municipalities could opt out of lounges and retail, right? It's like, okay, well, we've seen that conversation here. Like we saw that in Mississauga and some other places, and it happens in New Jersey, and it's going to happen in Minnesota. We had conversations about it in South Dakota. Like the conversations just seem to repeat themselves over and over again. Do you sort of see trends along those lines too? And are municipalities, cities, and states getting smarter as they regulate?
Yeah, they are. I mean, we're definitely fighting that big stigma, especially in the US. There's a lot of NIMBYism when it comes to decriminalization or legalization for adult use happening in the US. But yeah, definitely in that, and in the social equity justice approach that they have in which businesses actually get licensed as well. That I think is gonna I can only expect that to continue as things go on, and it will remain a very competitive nature because everyone wants in.
Yeah. Yeah. I think New York has certainly taken all the information that's been done so far around social equity and around lounges actually too, and sort of incorporating that into the regulations. But Lucas, it's always good to start the year talking to you. I don't know if we've ever revisited things you said and predictions you made, but I'm glad we did today. And I don't think you were off. I just think maybe the time horizon with which you were predicting was not long enough, maybe. So eventually the cannabis health products and the packaging and the marketing regulations, those will come to pass. It'll just be maybe another year and you'll be right.
Yeah, I think this year, we're moving out of infancy into maturity in the Canadian industry. I think everyone's sort of learning how to sail this ship, and they're making smarter moves instead of sort of big, tax and jibs as they were in the past. There's a lot of operational efficiency that seems to be a big focus for industry. The capturing the most territory phase is well gone, and people are driving steady.
Yeah. Yeah. And I know it's maturing because my beard just keeps getting grayer and grayer every year. That just goes on. I think the first time we met, may have a clean shave and no beard, and it certainly wasn't gray even then. But the years do add up, especially during COVID. But Lucas, I really appreciate the time now and always and the partnership. And we look forward to connecting with you on these issues, but others as well. So thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Jay. It's a pleasure.
That was Lucas McCann of CannDelta. If you like this program, please rate and review the show wherever you heard it. It helps support the work we do. We're able to do what we do because of ongoing partnerships with Alterna Savings, Cannabis at Work, Cannabis Benchmarks, CannDelta, Gallagher, Headset, and Torque and Main. Find out all that we do at businessofcannabis.com.